Hi, Love Hombo here. If you watched the previous video in this series, you've already picked a place to practice your tracking that you can go back to over and over. You've made sure you have essential trail gear and clothing, and you've begun assembling items for your track pack. So in this video, I want to introduce the 4 core skills that are part of every tracker's repertoire, whether they're beginners or masters. I also want to introduce you to the 6-way filter, which is a way of locating sign and also for recording sign. And then at the end, I'll give you a fieldwork assignment so you can have a specific focus and purpose for getting in some dirt time. I'll be packing up as we go, so I hope this will serve as a review for basic items to put in your track pack. Of course, a field reference, because I never know what I'm going to find out there that I want to check out. Never leave home without it compass. Skills I remember with the acronym OSIC, O-S-I-C. That stands for observe, select, interpret, and conclude. In this video, I'll talk about the first skill set, observe. I'll try to be orderly about it, so if you want to make notes as I go through, you can. I use the term observe in a broad sense, meaning 4 of our 5 senses. The sense I eliminate is taste, because I don't recommend tasting scat, kill site remains, animal leftovers, and such like for obvious reasons. The second sense is smell, and I use that in a limited way too. I do not recommend smelling scat, kill remains, animal leftovers, or anything like that, because there are many parasites and microbes, such as and viruses like hantavirus, that are airborne and that can make you sick for a very long time. However, you can smell when a skunk has walked by. You can smell them when you drive by them on the road. You can smell when you're near a moist area, coming into a moist area from a dry area. You can smell rain when it's about to come. So it's always a good idea to deliberately turn on your sniffer when you get out to track. Binoculars. The third sense is touch. You can use touch to distinguish between a twig end that's been nibbled off by a deer and a twig end that's been cut through by a rabbit, for example. You can use touch to find a track where you think it ought to be, but you can't see it because of the leaves. Often, if you feel under the leaves, you can find the track. You can also use touch to find details in a track that you really can't see because of the lighting. The fourth sense is sound. We're not used to listening well in the woods, and part of that is because our mind is very busy. And hearing, it depends on how good your ears are. Mine are not all that good. Ask my wife or grandkids. But you can train your ears to hear things that otherwise you would not even hear, or they would not register. For example, you can hear squirrels scolding bypassers or other squirrels or blue jays. You can hear a deer splashing across a creek even though you can't see it. You can hear geese flying overhead. Sometimes what's important to listen for is what's not there that ought to be there. If you're walking through the woods and there's a usual amount of bird song, and all of a sudden it stops off somewhere, you know that something has recently moved into that area. So when you get in the woods, turn on your hearing and deliberately stop and listen for everything you can hear. And the last sense is sight. And most of the tracking that we'll focus on is visual tracking. So that's what most of the skill development will be built around. Well, you can tell that once you're going tracking, it's worth taking a few moments at the beginning to just stand still or sit still and begin listening, smelling, looking, feeling, sniffing the air for any scent, so that your senses become immersed where you are right now and you forget about all the stuff that you left back in the car. And with that, I'm pretty well packed up for tracking. The second point I want to make about observe is that when you're tracking, and generally when you go in the woods, you must slow down. If you walk at sidewalk speed or office speed, you're not going to see anything, and you'll scare the bejeebers out of every critter in the vicinity. So what I suggest you actually deliberately practice doing is taking 1 step per second. 1 step per second. And after 2 or 3 steps, stop and do a scan 360 degrees to look for sign. 360 degrees because your last step may have just taken you past sign, which you can only see on this side. Slow is good. Do not expect to cover a lot of ground unless what you're doing is a form of pursuit tracking like military interception, law enforcement apprehension, or search and rescue. The third point about observe is to make sure you capture your observations in one or more ways. The book is pretty much basic and essential. I also take a digital camera with me because often I see sign that I can't understand and I want to capture it on film so I can take it home, study it, refer to books or to the internet. And if you have a camera with enough megapixels in it, you can even enlarge sections of it so that you can actually see a piece of hair in scat. And I should have added here that documentation does a really important thing for your development as a tracker. It helps you create and lock in what are called search images. So what took you 3 minutes to notice and then sort of figure out, you can do almost at a glance once you've seen enough of it. And you can find it much more quickly if you have the correct search image in your head. The next thing I want to share with you is what I called at the beginning of the video the 6-way filter. It's a way of organizing your physical movements of observation and a way of recording those observations. You can also use it to create field reference notes, but I'll talk about that later.